and welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review. Today we're going to be taking a look at the latest box set as a part of the Doctor Who spin-off series, being Unit the New Series, starring Gemma Redgrave as Kate Stewart, alongside Ingrid Oliver playing Osgood. This box set did in fact come out around April in 2019. It has in fact been a bit of a delay to get this review out due to me having university exams, meaning that only now at the start of June I have finally eventually got round to actually listening to this box set. And due to it being the 8th box set as a part of Unit the New Series, it is in fact the last for a while as well, because after the release of this set, Unit the New Series is going to be going on a little bit of a hiatus, I do believe for around a year. Of course the series will be returning, but it just gives Big Finish a little bit more time to plan whatever happens next, which I think, considering that this series has been going on for quite a while now, the break is certainly something of which that is needed. Of course, as always, in the description below, I will leave the link to go and buy this release from the Big Finish website. It is, of course, currently out now. The download version of this box set is only £19.99, and of course, the physical version, I do believe, is around £22.99. However, do be warned, due to me, in fact, filming this review quite late on, this box set does go up in price to £30 and £35 for the physical box set and the download at the end of June. So if you're interested by what I say throughout this review, act quickly, because it is going to be increasing in price in literally a few weeks' time. So taking a look at the production notes for this release, of course, as per usual, the director is Ken Bentley, the executive producers are Nicholas Briggs and Jason Haigh-Ellery, the music has been created by Howard Carter, the producer is David Richardson, the script editor is Matt Fitton, the sound design has been also created by Howard Carter, and the writers are Jonathan Morris, Lisa McMullen and Guy Adams. So much like with the previous box set from Unit the New Series, being Unit Revisitations, featuring the return of the Wirren, as well as a sequel to The Mind of Evil, this box set does have a slightly altered format to that of the earlier box sets in Unit the New Series that are pretty much normally one big massive 4-hour blockbuster style adventure, and they are normally just parts within a series. This time round we in fact have 3 separate adventures, the first of which is This Sleep of Death, as written by Jonathan Morris. The second episode is Tempest, as written by Lisa McMullen, and then this series continues with the 2-part final story being The Power of River Song, as written by Guy Adams. So taking a look at the first episode of this box set, we have This Sleep of Death, as written by Jonathan Morris, and this episode is in fact a rather interesting and different episode. The episode does in fact act as a little bit of a sequel to the Doctor Who Big Finish main range story from the 6th Doctor era, being Static, which was in fact released I think in December 2017, and when I originally heard this I was a little bit concerned because I thought it may in fact alienate some of the new listeners to this series who haven't actually listened to Static as an episode due to it being a part of a completely different area of Big Finish. However, this episode in fact doesn't act at all reliant to Static as a story, which is absolutely brilliant. Jonathan Morris has actually written this story with it in mind that this episode needs to act independently by itself, and it isn't reliant on Static as an actual story whatsoever. So if you haven't listened to that episode, do not worry, you can still listen to this episode. However, naturally, of course, due to that episode featuring the 6th Doctor, I recommend you all listen to it anyway, because it's a pretty decent story and it features Colin, so what is not to like? The episode in fact starts in a rather hard-hitting way, because you see a soldier or a sergeant called Warren Calder essentially commit suicide off a unit lab building, and it's something of which that I certainly wouldn't imagine would happen within the TV show itself, and it is a very quite emotion-filled scene. It's something of which that I certainly do not expect from the pre-titles of a Doctor Who spin-off. It certainly captured you immediately, and the rest of the episode is completely based around that scene and why Warren Calder killed himself. And originally I did think that this episode was going to be about kind of workplace anxiety and the pressures of acting within Unit as a workplace, and maybe the strain that this has on somebody's life, being of course a human, and naturally humans get stressed when they see things that are quite gruesome and of course violent, and I thought that the episode was going to be based around that and emotions and things. However, it wasn't. This episode is in fact based around the idea of the afterlife and being scared of what happens after life itself. And I think the whole concept is rather intriguing, and it was lovely to return back to Abbey Marston, of course the location from Static, and we have that whole idea of the Static returning and basically using a rather advanced form of seance in order to contact the dead and basically find out things about them before they died. And in this case you have Warren Calder and why Kate wanted to find out why he nicked a vial of Silurian plague, I do believe it was. However, that in fact bears very little importance to the plot itself, as we have the return of the Static and that monstrous creature and them basically harbouring dead bodies, and we have a rather nice unit historical where you have unit soldiers from the past being resurrected in order to help almost the new series cause to an extent. And it is very grim because you do, after you've essentially used this person that has been brought back from the dead, you kind of need to explain to them that they are now going to be returned back to the moment of their death as their use has kind of expired. It is a very grim idea, and I think that Kate works very well within this story. Osgood also gets took over. Again, she's possessed by one of the Static, which is like kind of a reoccurring theme for Osgood. It happens quite a lot. It would be nice to maybe see that toned down a bit in the future, to say the least. But yeah, I think generally a very nice story. The Static are as brilliant as usual, and it really says something that so far, with that 2-hour monthly range story and this 1-hour episode from Unit the New Series, we've had 3 hours in total of media with the Static, and yet Jonathan Morris is no closer to actually revealing anything else about them. They still remain a very mysterious entity and very powerful at that, and I think that that is what makes them so effective. You do not really know anything about them, you just know that they are there and they can take over dead bodies, and I think that is very eerie and very much a good episode to in fact listen to, I think, around Halloween. The second episode of the box set is Tempest, as written by Lisa McMullen. Now, this is in fact my first ever encounter of Lisa McMullen as writing a Doctor Who story. I do believe that she was involved in the 8th of March National Women's Day box set. I didn't in fact review that one, so it's lovely to be exposed to another Big Finish writer who I've not yet encountered as of yet up until now. And I must admit that this story is once again a rather unique one and put me in the mindset of the previous box set of Unit Revisitations, where you had the monster that could sing and have symphonies and things like that. It was all very unusual and very alien and beyond the human comprehension. And of course this episode takes on a very similar tone, because you have this whole idea of the weather acting very unusually, and we have Osgood and as well as Sam Bishop actually being sent out to a rather remote Scottish island because an old woman within a house has in fact reported that the wind is talking to her down her chimney, and she's very bizarre. And I think that this story is what I would like to call the unit field trip kind of story. It is great to see the unit team actually taken out of the standard urban landscape of London. It's nice to see them doing something a little bit different, because at the same time of having Osgood and Sam up at a sort of secluded Scottish island, you also have Kate off the coast of England, in fact at an oil rig, and we have some rather unusual location changes throughout this story. You kind of hop between the two. However, both of the plots are of course related, and there is a very interesting concept in this story, of course, because oil is something of which that is very much in demand and supply of it is very high, and it is a very profitable business. And there is this whole idea of the debate between, do we continue digging for the oil or pumping out of the surface, whatever they do, I don't know oil terms, or do we stop drilling for the oil and basically do what is humanely right and kind of save the alien race and save their spaceship. And naturally the oil company believes that continuing on their business and corporation to get more profit essentially is more important, because the government cares more about profit as opposed to alien life. And I actually imagine that in this current political climate that we are in, they'll probably favour the profit of the oil more than aliens from out of space. But this episode does of course have the alien that can sort of modify molecules and particles in order to create this rather unusual weather, because they are trying to get the unit's attention essentially in order to seek help, because their spaceship is trapped underwater and they can't get it out. And it's kind of a story where you have the innocence of an alien race. They're not necessarily a threat or a monster, they are just an alien that is kind of a bit misinterpreted, and I think that is a nice change as well for a unit box set, simply because you have a lot of aliens or villains that just want to come in and destroy everything, as with the next story. However, this episode is just a slightly different tone. It is also lovely to see Warren Brown back as Sam Bishop. Of course, he is a character that's been reoccurring throughout the majority of these box sets. However, he kind of comes and goes. I do believe that this is because of his external work commitments from other dramas, I think, on TV. And yeah, it is a bit of a shame because I feel like, unfortunately, some of the previous box sets have been a bit inconsistent with his character over the past few box sets that have certainly suffered a little bit from having his absence. However, it is lovely to see him back for this story. It's nice to have some development in there as well of Osgood, and actually considering that it's only her and Sam on this island, it kind of means that Osgood needs to be the leader, and she's certainly developed quite a lot throughout this series. She's been through her fair strain of different things going on, and they've certainly put her to the test. However, it's nice to see that she's in fact became very powerful and also a very resilient character. By far my favourite part of this story for me is Alexandra Matthie's character of Mother McCracken, a mad old woman that is basically on this island in the middle of nowhere with her pet owl, Dougal, and she's going a little bit insane, I think that is fair to say. And one thing that I can observe from Lisa McMullen's form of writing is that the story is very much focused around characters such as Mother McCracken that do have quite a lot of presence, and I think that if she wasn't in this story, it would have in fact been a rather dull episode. However, she brightens it up, she adds a little bit of comic relief, but also at the same time you kind of believe in her. She's a character that you do take seriously, but at the same time she does have a little bit of a mental side, and it is nice to have that lighter hearted element in there. And as I say, I think that that is something that Lisa McMullen is certainly very strong at, creating characters, certainly compared to the person on the oil rig as well. I think that they were very believable, coming from that very corporate type of lifestyle and believing that profit is more important. Everything about this story is very character based, and if anything the actual alien kind of takes a step back and it doesn't really feel as important because all of the other characters are the main key point of this story. And I think that certainly works well, and it is something that is very effective, especially within Unit as an actual series. It may not work as well in other forms of Big Finish release. Now, taking a look at the two-part series finale, we have The Power of River Song as written by Guy Adams. Now I'm going to take a look at both of these episodes as a whole, due to it being pretty much a two-part narrative, exactly the same locations and people and characters, and of course exactly the same plot, so it only makes sense to review them together. Basically, this episode is a big grandiose final story. Of course, it's quite a big deal because you have Unit the new series with Kate and Osgood, a rather large part of the Moffat era, of course reoccurring characters, and then you have River Song, of course one of the most reoccurring of them all, and one of the most important parts of the Moffat era of Doctor Who, especially the 11th Doctor era. So it is quite a big deal to have these two big massive landmarks essentially within the new series Doctor Who coming together for a story. Some may argue that it is in fact about time that these two bodies come together. However, I must admit, I've never really considered it. I've never thought bringing them both together would make sense. However, it kind of does, because due to it being a part of new series Doctor Who within the same era, it kind of makes sense for them to hop in between each other and at least have some interaction at some point. And this story is once again very much based around the Unit team. They are a key part of this episode, especially Kate within the early half. She's very personally affected in this story. Gemma Redgrave in fact gives some of her best performances as Kate Stewart that I've ever seen throughout the entirety of Unit the new series within this story, because the actual threat within the episode is very personal to her, and I think that there is a few moments where she starts to crack a little bit and you start to see that more vulnerable side coming out. Of course, if you've listened to previous box sets, you will know that Kate is very professional and you don't really see much emotion from her. I think that it's quite a notorious thing that she's very cold in the way that she acts sometimes, and I think that within this story kind of throws it out of the window and we kind of start to see that vulnerable side, which certainly gives the actual story itself a little bit of tension. Meanwhile, Sam Bishop goes off in fact on another little field trip, I do believe to Kent, and he meets up with Jackie McGee, who is a reoccurring journalist character who has pretty much been in Unit the new series since the very beginning. She was even in the first box set, Unit Extinction, and it is lovely to see her back. Once again, Tracy Wiles has done a very nice job with her character. She's very fun once again, and you kind of think that she's not very intelligent. However, at the same time, when you get to know her, she's in fact a very intelligent character, and I imagine that at some point she's in fact going to join Unit full time. I think she's going to be a character that we will see a lot more of, and maybe have a few more integral roles in the later series. Osgood goes off on another field trip as well, separate from Sam, and she later, in part 2, actually comes face to face with River Song properly, and she basically becomes her companion for that episode. And I must admit, I was kind of dreading that first reaction, because I'm so used to Osgood being the fan, because in TV Doctor Who, she was always portrayed as the fan, constantly getting overexcited, and it's nice to see that Big Finish have toned down those gags. She is now a character within her own right. She isn't just essentially what she became within the TV show, a mouthpiece for the fans essentially. She isn't really that fangirly about meeting River Song at all. She doesn't in fact know who she is, because River Song has been deleted from the Unit files, thankfully, and in fact she is a little bit more reserved around River. She doesn't really trust her, and likewise at the same time Alex Kingston does put in quite a good job as River Song as well. She was kind of enjoyable. I don't really have too much to say about her. I think I've certainly seen better episodes from her, especially within Doom Coalition. I thought that that box set, or that quadrilogy of box sets, in fact sold her a little bit more to me than some of the other forms of River Song that I've seen over the years, but it was nice to see her within this, kind of being a little bit of a doctor figure in a way, but at the same time she didn't really have too much to do. Same does in fact apply for the monster of this box set as well, the Vampirics, which are basically this creature that feeds off other people and time anomalies, and they've put time anomalies all over England in this time period, most of which Sam does come face to face with, such as dinosaurs and Vikings, which is quite fun. Yeah, the actual monsters themselves, they kind of just don't really have that much to do, and it would have been nice to maybe see a bit more about them. For me, the one story that I really did enjoy and sells this box set as a whole for me is The Sleep of Death. I really thought that that was a dark episode, really fun at the same time, and I respected it. And the same goes for Lisa McMullen's story as well, Tempest. I think that this box set for me is an example of how the two singular stories did more for me than the actual two-parter, which is in fact a drastic change considering in Unit Revisitations I was saying the complete opposite. The Wirren two-parter was in fact the one that I really loved, and the singular episodes were the ones that I loved a little bit less. So yeah, it's nice to have that change, it's nice to have that variety, and I think that with this box set that is very much the case. But in conclusion, for Unit the new series, Series 8, Unit Incursions, this box set is quite a fun one. There are some little gems in there, including The Sleep of Death and Tempest being a rather unique story. And naturally, if you are a fan of both the Unit family and River Song, this box set is also perfect for you to have that rather big and large blockbuster style series finale episode that does hop over the place quite a lot. There's lots of different locations, which may in fact put the new series listener off a little bit, because some parts of the plot, I must admit, after all the Big Finish listening that I have done over the years, even I got a little bit confused at some points. It kind of just felt like there was a lot going on with lots of different characters, but I still think it was a respectable episode. I think that it was certainly an interesting one as well, a nice milestone within Doctor Who, and it's nice to see that Big Finish have filled in yet another gap of bringing in and colliding those two bodies, as I say, from the new series era of Doctor Who. Would I recommend this box set as a whole? Personally, if I was to recommend a box set for me that actually sort of said what Unit is about, I certainly would recommend one of the earlier box sets. I certainly recommend Unit Extinction, box set 1, Unit Silenced, I think that was box set 3, Unit Assembled, naturally, because it is the essentially classic series Doctor Who meets new series Doctor Who, and also more recently Unit Cyber Reality, featuring the most modern interpretation of the Cybermen, of course also starring Derek Jacobi, and all of those box sets, in fact, funnily enough, are a four-parter. All of them are one story spread across 4 episodes, and I think that Unit works a lot better within that style, which is very unusual. Normally I'm not very in favour for box sets like that. I do like those little standalone 1-hour stories, but in the case of Unit, especially with given the main amount of recurring characters that we have within the Unit team, the longer stories certainly work a lot better. And bearing in mind that we are now on a hiatus after this review, I really hope that Big Finish bear that in mind, and the next series of Unit we do in fact get is maybe a bit more consistent and maybe has a bit more of a larger plan, such as, say, Doom Coalition or Ravenous, where you kind of know it is all leading to something. A minute, comparing it to more long-term series, such as Jago and Lightfoot, I get a sense of consistency with those box sets. I feel like it is one big massive story where you have a series and a plot arc, that plot arc ends, the other one starts. It's a new chapter, you have a few interlocking references here and there, but you know exactly what is going on. And so far with Unit, I'm kind of missing that backbone or that spine and that structure that I really hope does in fact occur, as I say, when Unit does eventually return. No doubt in probably a year and a half, something like that. So thank you very much for watching this review. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have any questions about Unit the new series or this box set, please do leave them in the comments section below and I will reply to them at some point in the near future. And of course do stay tuned for more Doctor Who Big Finish reviews every single month on The Host Productions, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.